Every man wants to be respected. Every man wants to be seen as capable, powerful, unshakable. But what most never realize is that the very thing they build to feel powerful, their ego, slowly becomes the silent architect of their downfall. It's the reason you stop learning. It's the reason you argue instead of improving. It's the reason you feel stuck even when you're doing everything right. The Stoics understood this centuries ago, that ego is not confidence, it's blindness. It's the illusion that you're already great, while the truth is you're just comfortable. Ego is the quiet killer of potential. It doesn't shout, it whispers. You already know enough. You're better than them. You deserve more. And when you start listening, your growth ends right there. So if you truly want to build an unbreakable mind, you must destroy your ego before it destroys you. Today we'll dive into the Stoic philosophy that exposes ego for what it really is, not strength, but weakness disguised as pride. Part 1. The invisible enemy, how ego hides inside your mind. Ego is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It hides beneath your thoughts, masks itself as confidence, and grows every time you're praised, every time you're right, every time you choose comfort over truth. Most people think ego is arrogance, the person who boasts, the one who dominates conversations, the one who refuses advice. But the Stoics knew ego is deeper and more dangerous than that. It's not just external behavior, it's an internal condition of the mind. It's what Marcus Aurelius warned about when he said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." Ego blinds you from your own ignorance. You might be more humble than most. You might even think you have your ego under control. But ask yourself, when someone corrects you, do you truly listen, or do you instantly prepare your defense? When someone else succeeds, do you feel inspired, or does something inside quietly tighten, as if your own worth just dropped a level? When life humbles you through failure, loss, or rejection, do you grow, or do you tell yourself that the world is unfair? That's ego right there. It's not confidence. It's fragile pride, constantly protecting its false image. Ego wants you to win arguments, not truth. It wants admiration, not respect. It wants control, not growth. The Stoics saw this pattern clearly. Seneca said, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." But to reach that level, you must first conquer yourself. Ego blocks that. It convinces you that introspection is weakness. It keeps you chasing validation, likes, compliments, titles, anything that feeds your illusion of superiority. But superiority is a prison. Once you think you're above others, you stop evolving. The real danger is that ego feels good. It rewards you instantly. You post something online, get praise, and your mind whispers, "You're special." You succeed once, and suddenly you believe you're unstoppable, until the next failure slaps you back to reality. Stoics warned us that fortune and failure are both tests, not of ability, but of ego. When things go well, ego grows. When they go bad, ego collapses. The wise man stays balanced through both, because his sense of self is grounded not in outcomes, but in principle. The ego-driven person measures everything externally: followers, money, recognition, superiority. But the Stoic measures only one thing: control over the self. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor of Rome, wrote daily reminders to avoid being Caesarified, meaning not to let power corrupt his perspective. Imagine that, the most powerful man on earth warning himself not to believe his own status. That's the discipline ego hates most: self-awareness. To kill ego, you must first observe it. Every moment of pride, defensiveness, or superiority is an opportunity for awareness. When someone insults you, don't react. Study the reaction. When you feel envy, don't suppress it. Analyze it. Ego feeds on emotional reactions. Awareness starves it. The Stoic path is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming egoless. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less often. It's shifting focus from "how do I look" to "what am I becoming?" It's the constant practice of detachment from external validation and attachment to inner discipline. When you stop needing to prove your worth, you become untouchable. Criticism no longer threatens you. Failure no longer defines you. Success no longer blinds you, because all of those exist outside of your control. What you control, your thoughts, actions, and discipline, becomes your only concern. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom isn't about status, it's about silence inside your mind. No noise from ego, no battle for validation. To not be egoistic doesn't mean you become weak. It means you become unshakable. The loudest people are often the most insecure. The strongest people, however, don't need to announce their strength. They simply act with clarity and conviction. The Stoic warrior doesn't crave applause. He craves truth, because truth refines him. Ego protects you from pain, but it also protects you from growth. Pain is your teacher. Ego is the wall that keeps you from hearing the lesson. Start practicing awareness today. When you speak, ask, "Am I seeking truth or validation?" When you act, ask, "Is this driven by purpose or pride?" When you react, ask, "Am I protecting my image or my integrity?" These small reflections are how the mind evolves. Ego thrives in unconsciousness. It dies in awareness. So understand this. Ego doesn't make you powerful. It makes you predictable. The man without ego, however, is unstoppable. Not because he never fails, but because failure doesn't touch his worth. He knows who he is, what he stands for, and what truly matters. Self-mastery, not self-image. That's where real freedom begins.
Part 2. How ego blocks growth and self-awareness. Ego doesn't destroy you overnight. It erodes you quietly, like water dripping on stone. It's the subtle decay of your openness to truth, your hunger to improve, your humility to learn. The tragedy is that most people never even realize it's happening. They mistake confidence for ego, self-respect for superiority, and pride for strength. The Stoics saw ego as the enemy of reason. To them, ego was not power, it was blindness. And blindness to reality, Marcus Aurelius wrote, is the root of all suffering. The moment you stop seeing yourself clearly, you start becoming your own obstacle. Here's how ego kills growth. It replaces curiosity with certainty. The mind that once asked, "How can I be better?" starts asking, "How can I prove I'm right?" You stop exploring, stop questioning, stop improving. Not because you've reached mastery, but because ego convinces you that you already have. The student becomes the pretender. The beginner's fire that once fueled your growth turns into smoke. Seneca warned, "You must keep learning as long as you are ignorant, and you will remain ignorant until you die." But ego resists that truth. It whispers, "You've already learned enough," and that's the moment growth stops. Think about how many people fail to reach greatness, not because they lack potential, but because they're addicted to being seen as great. They spend more time defending their reputation than improving their reality. Ego is obsessed with perception. It needs validation, recognition, superiority. It's terrified of being seen as weak, wrong, or ordinary. But the Stoic knows, to learn, you must first accept ignorance. To grow, you must first accept imperfection. Ego can't handle that because it feeds on illusion, not truth. Ego also blinds you to feedback, one of life's most valuable teachers. The Stoic understands that every insult, every critique, every rejection carries wisdom if you look at it without emotion. Ego, however, treats every critique as an attack. It reacts, defends, argues. It builds walls of self-justification instead of bridges of understanding. You've seen it in yourself. The instant defensiveness when someone points out a flaw, that's ego flaring up, saying, "Protect the image." The wise man listens, not to agree, but to understand. The fool speaks, not to clarify, but to be heard. When ego controls your ears, you hear only what feeds your pride. When humility controls your ears, you hear what shapes your truth. Ego also creates emotional fragility. You become reactive, offended, competitive, always comparing yourself, always measuring your worth against others. When someone else rises, you feel diminished. When someone criticizes you, your peace shatters. When someone ignores you, you question your value. That's the emotional slavery ego brings. It ties your self-worth to the opinions of others. The Stoics called this a form of madness, to depend on what you cannot control. Epictetus taught that peace comes when you focus only on what's yours, your thoughts, your actions, your character. Everything else, praise, recognition, comparison, belongs to the external world. When your happiness depends on external things, ego owns you. Ego also warps your relationship with failure. To the Stoic, failure is feedback, neutral information that reveals where to improve. To the ego-driven person, failure is humiliation. It's proof of inadequacy, a stain on the illusion of perfection. So instead of analyzing the failure, ego hides it. It blames others, makes excuses, rationalizes, avoids responsibility, all to protect its fragile identity. That's why people repeat the same mistakes for years, because their ego won't let them face the truth. Growth requires pain, but ego refuses pain, and without pain, there's no transformation. The Stoic way is to practice radical self-honesty. When you fail, you say, "I was unprepared." When you get angry, you say, "I lost control." When you feel envy, you admit, "I'm insecure." This brutal honesty is not self-criticism, it's self-liberation. You can't fix what you won't face. Ego hides flaws in the dark. Awareness exposes them to light. Marcus Aurelius would write each night, reflecting on his own actions, mistakes, and emotions, not to punish himself, but to improve himself. That's how you build power, through self-scrutiny, not self-deception. Ego also makes you chase recognition instead of mastery. You stop working for excellence and start working for applause. You start doing things not because they're right, but because they make you look good. That's the path to mediocrity. The Stoics were immune to that trap because they focused only on virtue, being excellent for its own sake. They lived by principle, not perception. When you act for recognition, your power lies in others' hands. When you act for principle, your power stays within. Ryan Holiday in Ego is the Enemy describes ego as an unchecked belief in your own importance. That's what ruins countless talented people. They achieve a little, feel superior, and stop evolving. Stoics knew that the higher you rise, the more humble you must become, because the fall always follows pride. Confidence says, "I can improve." Ego says, "I'm better." One leads to mastery, the other leads to stagnation. You must realize ego isn't something you fix once. It's something you manage daily. It's a shadow that grows stronger whenever you stop being aware. You can be humble in one area and deeply egotistical in another. You might be open to feedback about work, but defensive about relationships.
You might accept criticism from strangers but explode when it comes from family. Ego hides in every corner of your mind, waiting for a moment of comfort to return. That's why Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, don't be overheated by pride when praised or broken when blamed. Balance kills ego. Reflection kills ego. Awareness kills ego. The Stoic approach to ego isn't about pretending you're worthless. It's about anchoring your worth in truth. It's knowing your strengths, accepting your weaknesses, and focusing only on what's within your control. You stop needing to win in conversations or prove your intelligence, because your validation no longer depends on being right. Your peace becomes internal. That's the highest form of power, quiet confidence rooted in self-awareness. To dismantle ego, practice deliberate humility. Ask for advice from people below your skill level. Admit when you're wrong, out loud. Acknowledge when someone else does something better than you. Listen more than you speak. These acts don't make you small, they make you wise. The Stoics saw humility as strength because it takes courage to face yourself honestly. Ego hides from truth. Humility hunts it. Understand this, every time you choose humility over pride, you build self-awareness. Every time you accept criticism instead of defending your image, you grow stronger. Every time you focus on improving instead of impressing, you get closer to mastery. The battle against ego isn't glamorous. It's silent, personal, and lifelong. But it's the foundation of greatness, because the man who can control his ego can control his mind. And the man who can control his mind can control his entire life.
The prison of validation. Ego is not just arrogance, it's dependence. The invisible rope that ties your sense of worth to the applause of others. You think you're free because you're doing what you want. But if that want is shaped by what others will say, you're still chained. Most people live their entire lives performing, pretending to be strong, pretending to be wise, pretending to have it all together because they fear being seen as weak. But the Stoics had no use for performance. They understood that validation is poison disguised as honey. It tastes good in the moment, but it slowly rots your discipline, your purpose, and your clarity. When you need people to tell you you're great, you've already lost power over yourself. Look at the modern world. Every post, every story, every like is a mirror people stare into, asking, "Am I enough yet?" But the Stoic man doesn't ask the world for permission to feel worthy. His sense of self is forged internally, not borrowed externally. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be good, first believe that you are bad." That wasn't self-hate, it was humility, the gateway to growth. You can't fix what you refuse to see as broken. The ego blinds you to your flaws because it hates being humbled. It convinces you that admitting weakness is losing, but the truth is the opposite. Acknowledging your weakness is the first step towards power. Ego is not confidence. Ego is fragile pride pretending to be strength. True confidence is quiet, internal, earned through discipline and mastery. Ego is loud, constantly needing proof, and that's why egoic people are always exhausted. They're performing non-stop, terrified of being exposed as less than what they portray. They can't rest because their identity depends on maintaining the illusion. The Stoic path strips all that away. It doesn't care how others see you, it only cares whether you are living in accordance with reason and virtue. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, wrote daily reminders to himself like a humble student. Do not be proud of your excellence. He could have commanded nations, yet he told himself to stay grounded. That's what makes him eternal.
The moment you think you're too great to be corrected, you begin your downfall. Ego is the voice that says, I already know this. Humility is the voice that says, I can learn from everything. The difference between the two determines whether you evolve or decay. When you chase validation, you become reactive. You bend your actions to the judgment of others, and every compliment or insult controls you. Someone praises you, you're high. Someone criticizes you, you're crushed. You are a puppet, your strings pulled by opinions. A Stoic cuts those strings. He builds himself on principles, not applause. He knows that people's opinions are like the wind, changing, random, out of your control. Seneca said, "What difference does it make to you whether others think ill of you when you know you are doing right?" That's the core, doing what's right, not what's popular. To defeat ego, you must first recognize how deeply it hides. It's not just in bragging or arrogance, it's in overthinking how you look, seeking approval for every move, or secretly hoping others fail so you can feel superior. That's all ego. You can't remove it overnight, but you can starve it by refusing to feed it validation. Every time you do something without needing to tell the world, you weaken it. Every time you admit, "I was wrong," you silence it. Every time you choose learning over showing off, you humble it. That's daily Stoic training, constant ego detox. Imagine, you walk into a room and everyone ignores you. The ego screams, "They don't respect me." The Stoic mind whispers, "Why do I need their attention?" That's freedom, when you no longer require recognition to feel whole. Ego thrives on comparison, but the Stoic mind only compares itself to who it was yesterday. The moment you shift from external measurement to internal improvement, you stop playing the world's game. You enter the arena of real mastery, where your only opponent is your former self. Ego doesn't want growth, it wants comfort. It wants to be right, to feel superior, to never be challenged. That's why it hates feedback and avoids situations that expose its flaws. But Stoicism teaches that discomfort is the only path to transformation. A person without ego can look like a fool for a moment if it means learning something that makes him wiser forever. Meanwhile, the egoic man stays ignorant to protect his pride. Which of the two do you think truly wins? If you want to kill ego, practice the opposite of what it wants. The ego wants attention, seek solitude. It wants to speak, choose silence. It wants to win arguments, listen instead. It wants to appear strong, admit when you're weak. Every time you deny the ego what it craves, it weakens. Every time you humble yourself, it dies a little more. This is not about hating yourself, it's about purifying yourself. The Stoics believed that humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. That's the difference between peace and chaos. Modern society glorifies ego. The alpha, the boss, the "I don't care what anyone thinks" attitude. But that's not strength. That's insecurity in disguise. Real strength doesn't need to shout. It just is. A Stoic doesn't chase dominance over others. He seeks dominion over his own impulses. When you master that, you walk into any room and people feel your presence, not because you demand it, but because you radiate calm control. The world follows those who don't need to prove themselves. There's another side of ego, the silent one, the self-pity version. The voice that says, "I'm not good enough, I'll never make it." That's ego too, inverted. It's still centered on self. The Stoic rejects both arrogance and self-loathing because both keep you trapped in the same orbit, obsession with me. Freedom begins when you shift your focus to purpose, duty, and virtue. It's not about you, it's about what you contribute. Ask yourself this: would you still train hard, create, or help others if no one ever saw or praised you? If the answer is yes, you're already on the Stoic path. If not, that's where your work begins. Because the moment you need an audience to act, you are owned by them. Epictetus warned, "You can be invincible if you enter no contest in which it is not in your power to win." The approval of others is not in your power. Your effort, your discipline, your choices are. So stop competing for validation. Compete only with your lesser self. The more you detach from the need to be admired, the more power returns to you. Suddenly, you don't waste energy managing impressions, defending your pride, or chasing clout. You start focusing on building your mind, your craft, your peace. And ironically, when you stop trying to impress, you naturally become impressive. That's the paradox of humility. When you no longer crave recognition, you earn it effortlessly. So, ask yourself today, what part of your life still runs on ego? Where are you pretending? What image are you protecting? Because that's where you're weak. The Stoics believed self-honesty was the sharpest weapon. You can't improve what you hide. Drop the act. Tear off the mask. You'll feel exposed at first, but soon you'll feel lighter. That's not weakness leaving. That's falsehood dying. The war against ego is a lifelong fight. It never truly ends because the ego adapts. It disguises itself as humility, as confidence, as "I don't care." That's why you must stay vigilant. Like a soldier sharpening his blade every morning, the Stoic sharpens his awareness every day. Every success, every praise, every improvement is a potential trap. The key is to remember this: the moment you start thinking you've made it, you stop growing. The moment you start believing you're better than others, you start decaying inside. The Stoic warrior walks through life with calm pride, not the pride that shouts, but the pride that acts. He doesn't need validation because his validation comes from living with integrity. He doesn't need to prove because truth proves itself through results.
Part 4. The Mirror of Failure. Failure. The word itself triggers the ego like a blade pressed against its throat. Because failure doesn't just bruise your pride, it shatters the illusion that you are untouchable. The ego feeds on success, on control, on looking like it knows everything. And when you fail, even slightly, that mask cracks. The world sees through. The ego panics. It scrambles to protect the story it built. It wasn't my fault. They sabotaged me. I didn't even try seriously. Excuses are the last line of defense against truth. But to the Stoics, failure isn't the enemy, it's the forge. It's the mirror that reveals what your pride tried to hide. You either face it and grow, or deny it and rot. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way," he wasn't romanticizing hardship, he was redefining it. The Stoic doesn't avoid failure, he uses it as raw material for mastery. Every setback is data. Every loss is a teacher. The ego, on the other hand, runs from failure because it fears exposure. But when you avoid failure, you avoid growth. That's why most people plateau. They stop trying new things the moment something threatens their image. They'd rather be safe than be great. Think about how deeply this plays out in your own life. How many times have you avoided doing something, starting a channel, launching a project, approaching someone, speaking up, because of the fear of looking stupid if it didn't work? That hesitation wasn't logic,
It was ego whispering, better to never try than to risk embarrassment. The Stoics would laugh at that. They didn't measure a man by how much flawless he looked, but by how much truth he could handle. If you're not failing, you're hiding. And if you're hiding, you're not living. Ego clings to perfection. Wisdom embraces process. The ego says, I can't afford to make mistakes. The Stoic says, I can't afford to stop learning. There's a massive difference. The ego wants to arrive. The Stoic wants to evolve. That's why one stagnates while the other transcends. The Stoic knows that every failure burns away illusion and pride, leaving behind only what's real: discipline, patience, clarity. Those who run from failure never develop these virtues. They become brittle. They crack at the first sign of pressure because they've never been tested. Seneca once said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Failure is friction. It's the resistance that shapes you into something unbreakable. But the ego resists that polishing because it hurts. It tells you that discomfort is proof something's wrong, when in reality, discomfort is proof that you're being refined. The Stoic flips that perception. Pain isn't punishment, it's preparation. Every disappointment is a signal. Something in you needs to level up. The greatest Stoic warriors were forged through humiliation, not applause. Epictetus was a slave who became one of the wisest philosophers in history. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor who constantly reminded himself not to let power corrupt him. Seneca was exiled, publicly shamed, and later forced to take his own life. Yet his writings on tranquility still guide millions. They all failed, yet none were defeated. Because failure doesn't destroy you, ego does. Failure only breaks those who tie their identity to success. The Stoic ties his identity to effort and virtue, things no failure can touch. So what do you do when you fail? Most people collapse into self-pity or denial. The Stoic pauses. He breathes. He analyzes. He asks, what can I learn? What part of me was weak? What truth is this showing me? That's how you turn failure into wisdom, by dissecting it without emotion. Emotion clouds judgment. Ego distorts perception. When you remove both, you can see the situation clearly. Maybe you were unprepared. Maybe you overestimated yourself. Maybe you simply got unlucky. All of those are fixable, but only if you admit them. Failure hurts, yes, but the pain isn't the problem. It's the story you attach it to. The ego says, I failed, therefore I'm worthless. The Stoic says, I failed, therefore I'm wiser. Same event, two mindsets. One grows stronger, the other collapses. The Stoic doesn't dwell on shame. He focuses on refinement. He doesn't take failure personally. He takes it as feedback from reality. Reality is the greatest teacher, and it's brutally honest. It doesn't care about your pride, your feelings, or your excuses. It simply reflects the truth of your preparation and mindset. The ego hates that truth, which is why it blames others. There's a quiet power in owning your failure completely. When you stop running from it, it loses its ability to control you. You can look the world in the eye and say, yes, I failed, and I learned. That kind of man is untouchable, because what can anyone use against you if you've already accepted your imperfections? That's the Stoic superpower, radical self-ownership. You can't humiliate someone who's already embraced humility. The ego believes its worth is tied to outcomes, success, recognition, victory. The Stoic knows his worth lies in his effort, discipline, and alignment with virtue. If he does everything within his power, he's already won, regardless of the result. The ego worships results. The Stoic worships the process.
That's why egoic people burn out after one setback, while Stoics keep moving forward. They've trained themselves to love the grind, not the glory. Let's make this practical. How do you handle failure the Stoic way? First, detach. Don't let emotion flood your reasoning. Observe the event as if you were advising a friend. Second, extract. Write down what failed, why, and what you'll do differently. Third, act again, immediately. The ego wants you to hesitate, overthink, and rebuild your pride before trying again. The Stoic acts without delay. He doesn't need confidence to act. He builds confidence by acting. That's how momentum stays alive. One of the biggest egoic traps after failure is the illusion of identity protection. You start telling yourself, that wasn't really me, I didn't even try my best. You create distance from your failure to protect your self-image, but that distance also prevents you from improving. Own it fully, stand in the fire. The Stoics believe that a man who learns to endure shame without breaking becomes indestructible. Because when you no longer fear failure, the world has no leverage over you. Ego sees failure as an attack. Stoicism sees it as feedback. Ego demands perfection. Stoicism demands persistence. These two mentalities lead to completely different lives. One spends its energy preserving an image. The other uses that energy to refine reality. Every time you choose humility over pride, you sharpen your blade. Every time you face failure head-on, you strip away illusion. And something strange happens when you embrace failure long enough. You begin to see beauty in it. You realize that failure is simply life sculpting you into someone capable of carrying greater weight. You start to crave truth more than comfort. You stop chasing wins and start chasing growth. That's when ego truly dies, not because you've suppressed it, but because you've outgrown it. So when life knocks you down next time, don't rush to defend yourself. Don't make excuses. Don't hide. Sit with it. Feel the sting. Let it humble you. Then stand up, sharper, quieter, more grounded. The Stoic warrior doesn't fear failure because he knows it's not the end, it's refinement. The more he fails, the stronger his foundation becomes, because every failure faced without ego becomes another layer of discipline, wisdom, and peace. The mirror of failure is cruel but fair. It reflects exactly who you are without filters. The ego hides from it because it hates the truth. The Stoic looks straight into it every morning and smiles. He knows that the man who can face his own flaws without flinching is already free.
Part 5. The illusion of control. Every ego thrives on one thing: control. The illusion that you can shape every outcome, influence every person, and bend the world according to your will. It's seductive because it makes you feel powerful. But the truth, the brutal truth that Stoics understood better than anyone, is that control is mostly a lie. You control far less than you think, and the ego can't handle that. The ego wants to be the architect of destiny, not its student. It wants to dominate life, not cooperate with it. But life doesn't negotiate, it humils. Every time you try to control what isn't yours to control, you set yourself up for frustration, anger, and burnout. Epictetus warned, some things are up to us and some things are not. That single mind is a roadmap to peace and a death sentence to ego. Because ego hates limits. It believes everything should go its way. If people don't behave as expected, it gets offended. If results don't arrive instantly, it gets anxious. If reality resists, it fights back harder, not with wisdom, but with stubbornness. The more you cling, the more you suffer. That's the first rule of ego. It mistakes obsession for control.
The Stoics flipped this entirely. They said freedom begins when you accept your lack of control, when you stop demanding that life obey you and start mastering what's actually within your reach, your thoughts, your emotions, your actions. That's it. Everything else is chaos, and the wise don't wrestle chaos, they flow with it. Look at your life right now. How much energy do you waste trying to control outcomes that are completely outside your reach? You want everyone to like you. You want your plans to always go smoothly. You want people to understand your worth, to recognize your effort, to treat you fairly. But none of that is guaranteed. And every time you attach your peace to those externals, you give your power away. The ego doesn't understand this. It equates external control with inner peace, so it keeps chasing situations it can dominate. The Stoic knows the opposite, that the only way to be free in an uncontrollable world is to control your inner state. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, millions of people, countless decisions, daily crises, and yet he even wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Emperor of Rome was reminding himself that he controlled almost nothing beyond his own perception and response. If the man who governed half the known world had to surrender control, what makes you think you can control your tiny slice of chaos? That's the humility of wisdom. The illusion of control is how ego keeps you trapped in cycles of stress. You plan, expect, and force, and when things go wrong, you spiral. The Stoic doesn't deny disappointment, but he accepts it instantly. He adapts faster. That's his superpower. He doesn't waste time wishing things were different. He redirects energy toward what can still be influenced. If it rains, he doesn't curse the sky. He adjusts his route. If people betray him, he doesn't plot revenge. He learns detachment. This adaptability makes him untouchable. The ego, however, gets stuck. It resents reality. It believes that if it just pushes harder, the world will bend. It never will. The greatest suffering in life often comes from resisting what already is. When something happens that bruises your pride, you replay it mentally 1,000 times. You think, if only I had said that, if only they had done this. That's ego pretending to have control over the past. The past is dead. The Stoic understands that energy spent on resistance is energy stolen from progress. You can't rewrite events, but you can rewrite your reaction. That's the only true control you ever have. And that's where the paradox lies. When you stop trying to control everything, you actually gain control over the only thing that matters, yourself. The ego is reactive. The Stoic is responsive. Ego demands. Stoicism accepts. Ego chases dominance. Stoicism practices discipline. When you surrender to what's outside your power, you stop fighting the current and start steering your own vessel with precision. You move with life instead of against it. That's real mastery. Think of control like a sphere. Inside it, your attitude, focus, discipline, interpretation, effort. Outside it, everything else, outcomes, opinions, time, other people's choices, fate. The ego spends 90% of its energy obsessing about the outside. The Stoic channels all of it into the inside. That's why Stoics look calm in chaos. They're not emotionally invested in what they can't command. Ego-driven people, however, are constantly anxious because their happiness depends on a world that doesn't care about their expectations. Control is an addiction, and ego is the dealer. The more you crave it, the weaker you become. Because the more you try to manipulate reality, the more reality reminds you of your insignificance. Stoics weren't pessimists, they were realists. They understood the cosmic scale of life. You are a brief flicker in an infinite timeline. The weather, the economy, other people's moods, the direction of fate, all of it will move whether you fight it or not. The ego sees that truth as defeat. The Stoic sees it as liberation. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, your mind becomes light. You stop clinging. You start flowing.
There's immense power in saying, I accept. It's not resignation, it's wisdom. It's choosing redirect energy from what you can't change to what you can. When life hits you with failure, the ego says, this shouldn't have happened. The Stoic says, it did. Now what will I do with it? That shift in perspective is everything. Because the ego wastes time arguing with reality, the Stoic uses that same time to evolve. And here's the subtle trick. Ego often disguises its control obsession as ambition. It'll tell you that you're just being driven, that you want excellence. But true ambition doesn't mean controlling outcomes. It means mastering consistency. The Stoic doesn't aim for domination, he aims for alignment. He wants his actions to match his principles. That's how you build unshakable peace while still pursuing greatness. Every morning, practice this mental exercise Marcus Aurelius used. Remind yourself that today, people will be unfair, things will go wrong, plans will shift, and none of that will ruin you unless you let it. The world doesn't owe you control. Your peace depends only on one thing, your discipline in handling chaos. Train that, and no setback can break you. The illusion of control is the ego's final defense, its desperate attempt to feel important in an indifferent universe. But once you accept that life owes you nothing, you become free. You stop demanding, and you start creating. You stop clinging to expectations, and you start embracing adaptability. You move from frustration to focus. The ego screams, why is this happening to me? The Stoic whispers, how can I use this? That's the difference between victims and warriors. Victims resist reality, warriors reshape themselves around it. You can't win against life, but you can evolve with it. And that evolution begins the moment you stop trying to control everything and start mastering yourself. Because in the end, control isn't about bending the world to your will, it's about bending your will to reality. That's how you become untouchable, unstoppable, unshaken. The illusion of control dies the day you realize this. You were never meant to dominate life. You were meant to dance with it, with grace, strength, and calm. And the one who learns that dance, he becomes truly free.
Part 6. The subtle poison of ego. How it silently destroys your progress. Ego doesn't scream, it whispers. It hides inside compliments, achievements, and that quiet voice that says, I deserve better. Most people never realize this. Ego doesn't just make you arrogant, it makes you fragile. When your self-worth depends on how others see you, every opinion becomes a weapon. One insult, one rejection, one moment of being overlooked, and you crumble. That's because ego ties your identity to external validation. And once that validation disappears, so does your sense of worth. A humble man, however, is untouchable. Criticize him and he listens. Reject him and he learns. Insult him and he smiles, because his value isn't negotiable, it's internal. That's why humility is true strength. It's not weakness or submission. It's freedom from the constant need to prove yourself. But here's the trap. Ego disguises itself as self-improvement. You start going to the gym, reading philosophy, building a business, but deep down, you're doing it to look disciplined, not be disciplined. You want recognition for your growth more than the growth itself. You want others to notice your grind. You start caring about how productive you appear, rather than what you actually accomplish. It's the most dangerous illusion of all. Ego wearing the mask of progress. Epictetus warned about this when he said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." The moment you start announcing who you are becoming, you've already started seeking validation again. Real improvement happens in silence, When you truly evolve, you don't need to convince anyone. Your presence speaks louder than your words ever could. The subtle poison of ego is that it constantly needs witnesses. It cannot survive in solitude. That's why people post their grind, flaunt their wins, or make sure others know how disciplined they are, because deep down, they're still performing for approval. The ego is terrified of being unseen. But true transformation doesn't need an audience. It happens in quiet mornings when no one is watching, in moments of restraint when you could have reacted but didn't, in small daily victories where you overcome yourself, not others. The Stoics believed mastery begins when you stop performing and start being. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth, yet wrote to himself daily reminders to stay grounded. Do not think yourself more than a part of the whole. Imagine that, an emperor reminding himself not to get drunk on his own power. Today, we gain 500 followers and start acting like gods. The irony couldn't be greater. Ego makes you forget that you're still dust in motion, replaceable, temporary, learning. And when life humbles you, because it always does, your ego will be the first to shatter. The problem is ego feeds on comparison. It doesn't want to be good, it wants to be better. Better than him, richer than her, more disciplined than them. It thrives on hierarchy. But the moment you start comparing, you've already lost control of your peace. The Stoics understood that the only person you should compete with is the man you were yesterday. Ego will always whisper, "You deserve more," while discipline answers, "Earn more." That's the battle every human must fight, between the voice that seeks comfort and the one that seeks truth. The ego wants shortcuts. Humility accepts the grind. The ego seeks validation. Discipline seeks mastery. The ego wants applause. Wisdom wants results. The day you realize you're not in competition with anyone but yourself, you'll finally breathe differently. Ego also thrives on illusion, the illusion of control. It makes you believe you can bend life to your will, that things should happen the way you want them to. But life owes you nothing. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. Focus only on what's within your control and accept what's not. Ego hates that idea because it wants everything to revolve around you. When something doesn't go your way, ego says, "This shouldn't have happened." But reality doesn't care about your preferences. Life unfolds according to nature, not your ego. The moment you internalize that, peace enters. Because ego is rebellion against reality, and humility is harmony with it. Here's the paradox. You can be confident and humble at the same time. In fact, that's real power. Confidence says, "I can handle it." Ego says, "I shouldn't have to." Confidence grows from competence and self-trust. Ego grows from insecurity disguised as superiority. That's why confident people don't need to prove anything. They're too busy doing. The ego-driven man, however, constantly needs to assert himself, remind others of his status, exaggerate his wins, and hide his flaws. The humble man doesn't hide his flaws because he's not defined by them. His identity isn't built on perfection. It's built on progress. And progress is always humble because it knows there's always more to learn.
So how do you kill the ego? You don't. You starve it. You stop feeding it validation, attention, and reaction. You stop justifying every mistake. You start observing yourself instead of defending yourself. The next time you feel triggered, criticized, or overlooked, pause. Don't react. That's your ego, demanding recognition. Let it starve. Every time you resist the urge to prove, defend, or brag, you're weakening the ego's control over your mind. The strongest men are the ones who no longer need to announce their strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." That line is the antidote to ego. When you receive success, receive it with gratitude, not arrogance. When you lose, let it go with grace, not bitterness. Because both pride and pain come from attachment. Attachment to outcomes, to image, to self-importance. The moment you detach, you gain control. The man who is humble cannot be humiliated because his sense of worth is untouchable. The man ruled by ego lives in fear. Fear of being forgotten, of being wrong, of being seen as less. Ego is not strength, it's dependency. It's your mind outsourcing confidence to other people's opinions. And as long as you do that, you'll never be free. The Stoics weren't trying to make you emotionless. They were trying to make you invincible. Invincible to praise, invincible to insult. When your sense of self comes from within, the world loses its power to control you. That's the highest form of power a man can reach. Not power over others, but power over himself. And that power begins the moment you stop needing to be right, recognized, or superior. So understand this, the war against ego isn't fought once, it's daily. It's every time you feel disrespected and choose calm instead of retaliation. It's every time you achieve something and stay grounded instead of bragging. It's every time you fail and take responsibility instead of blaming. Killing ego is a lifelong practice, and that's exactly why so few people ever reach true strength. Because killing ego requires humility, and humility requires brutal honesty. Most people would rather live with illusions than confront their own smallness. But the Stoic warrior accepts it. His goal is not to be seen as powerful, but to become powerful, quietly, silently, relentlessly. That's the paradox of ego. The less you need to prove, the more powerful you become. The moment you stop trying to be the loudest in the room, you're...
Part 7. The Ego versus Growth Paradox. Why you can't evolve if you need to be right. Ego is the invisible ceiling that limits your evolution. It doesn't let you grow, not because you can't, but because you won't allow yourself to be wrong. That's the paradox. Everyone wants to become better, but few are willing to admit that who they are right now might be the problem. Ego doesn't fear failure, it fears correction. It fears being questioned, challenged, or humbled. It's the voice that whispers, "I already know this," every time someone tries to teach you something new. It's the subtle resistance you feel when feedback hits too close to home. It's the defensiveness that kicks in before you even process the truth. That's why the smartest people often grow the slowest, because their ego convinces them they've already arrived. But the Stoics saw wisdom differently. To them, wisdom wasn't about knowing more than others. It was about knowing how much you don't know. The more you learn, the more you realize your ignorance.
That's humility, not weakness. That's awareness, not self-doubt. The beginner who knows nothing but listens learns faster than the expert who stops questioning. Ego traps you in a loop of self-justification. You start defending your past decisions just to protect your image. You hold on to toxic people, bad habits, or dead goals simply because admitting you were wrong feels like defeat. But that's the irony. You're not protecting your growth, you're protecting your pride. The ego's favorite illusion is permanence. It makes you believe that your identity is fixed, that who you were yesterday must be who you are today. But the Stoic path demands the opposite: constant self-examination, daily renewal, relentless correction. Seneca said, "No man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom is a deliberate act of killing ego every single day." Think about this. When was the last time you said, "I was wrong"? Most people can't even remember. They'd rather twist logic, make excuses, or blame others than say those 3 words. But "I was wrong" is the most powerful sentence in human language because it's the death of illusion and the birth of clarity. It takes a strong mind to admit error because it means tearing down part of the identity you've built. But that's what growth requires: destruction. You can't evolve while clinging to your former self. Ego wants to preserve your current version. Wisdom wants to upgrade it. The choice between the two defines your entire trajectory. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, imagining challenges before they happened, not to become pessimistic, but to stay humble. They mentally prepared for correction, failure, and loss so that when it came, it didn't sting their pride. Today's world does the opposite. People avoid correction like poison. We call every critique hate and every disagreement negativity. But what if the thing that hurts your ego is exactly what could save your future? Every person who challenges you, every failure that humiliates you, every mirror that exposes your flaws, they're all your teachers, but your ego blocks them out, labeling them as enemies, when in reality, they're your most valuable allies. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If someone can prove me wrong, I'll gladly change." That's power. Not the fake dominance of always being right, but the strength to evolve without shame. Because the man who can't be corrected is already finished. His mind is locked. His growth is done. His potential is dead. Ego loves that. It prefers comfort over progress. It would rather be right and stuck than wrong and growing. That's why so many people live in mental stagnation. They refuse to outgrow their own image. They'd rather maintain consistency than transformation. Ego is also addicted to control. It wants to dominate every conversation, situation, and relationship. It wants to be the authority, the alpha, the one who's always leading. But leadership built on ego isn't leadership. It's insecurity in disguise. The true leader listens more than he speaks. He admits when he doesn't know. He gives credit instead of taking it. Because real power doesn't come from always being right. It comes from always being adaptable. The Stoic warrior doesn't need to win every argument. He needs to win his inner peace. Here's the raw truth. Your ego doesn't care about your success. It only cares about your image. It would rather you stay small but look big than actually grow and risk looking foolish. That's why most people never start anything new. Their ego won't let them be seen as beginners. They won't start a YouTube channel because, what if people laugh? They won't ask for help because, what if I look weak? They won't try something new because, what if I fail? That's ego, protecting an illusion while suffocating your real potential. The Stoics would call this death before death.
when your ego kills your evolution long before your body dies. To defeat ego, you must do the one thing it fears most: embrace humility as a lifestyle. Seek correction, invite discomfort, admit ignorance. The moment you start doing that, your life changes. Because when you're no longer obsessed with being right, you become obsessed with learning. Every mistake becomes data. Every failure becomes feedback. Every critic becomes a mirror. That's when exponential growth begins. Not when you get it right, but when you're willing to get it wrong 1,000 times and keep going. The most dangerous ego isn't the loud one. It's the quiet one inside your mind whispering, "You already know." That voice is the reason you stop growing. It's the reason you scroll past insights that could change your life. It's the reason you reject advice that stings. If you want to destroy that voice, start practicing silence. Let your actions argue for you. Let your improvement be your proof. Let your results crush every doubt. Ego wants reaction. Humility gives none. Ego wants noise. Wisdom stays quiet. And remember, you're not at war with others. You're at war with the parts of yourself that refuse to evolve. The fight isn't outside you, it's inside you. Between the part that wants comfort and the part that craves greatness. Between your ego that says, "I know enough," and your higher self that whispers, "You've barely begun." That's the fight every Stoic trains for. Not victory over the world, but mastery over self. Because the moment you stop needing to be right, you finally start becoming unstoppable.
Part 8. The subtle power of humility. You've heard people say, "Stay humble." It's become such a cliché that most people don't even stop to understand what it truly means. They think humility is weakness, submission, or lack of confidence. But in reality, humility is one of the strongest, most liberating traits a human can possess. Because it's what keeps you grounded when you're winning and keeps you growing when you're not. The real reason most people fall from greatness isn't failure, it's ego. Ego is like a virus that multiplies the moment you start achieving something. It whispers lies like, "You're special, you don't need advice, you're better than them." And slowly, without noticing, you begin to lose the very mindset that helped you grow in the first place. Ego blinds you. Humility opens your eyes. Ego wants validation. Humility wants mastery. Ego says, "I know enough." Humility says, "There's always more to learn." Look at the greatest people to ever live. Marcus Aurelius, even as the most powerful man in the world, wrote reminders to himself every morning to stay humble and remember his mortality. Because he knew the higher you rise, the more dangerous your own mind becomes. The moment you think you've made it, that's the moment your downfall begins. But let's go deeper. What is humility really? It's not pretending you're small. It's recognizing that even your greatest abilities are temporary and can be taken away in a heartbeat. It's understanding that no matter how smart, strong, or successful you are, there's always something or someone that can humble you. Nature humbles the arrogant. Time humbles the careless. Life humbles everyone eventually. The difference is whether you learn humility willingly or wait for pain to teach it to you. True humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less often. It means being more focused on the mission than your image, on progress than your pride. When you walk into a room, you don't need to prove you're the smartest person there. The real power is being so secure that you don't have to prove anything at all. Ego is reactive. It constantly needs external proof of worth. Humility is internal. It's built on quiet self-assurance. Ego says, I want to be seen as great. Humility says, I just want to be great. Ego makes you talk more. Humility makes you listen better. Ego closes your mind. Humility keeps it open. The irony is, the more humility you are, the faster you grow, because you're constantly learning. People who operate with humility are unstoppable learners. They're open to feedback, criticism, and failure because they don't see it as a threat. They see it as data. They don't crumble when someone corrects them. They sharpen. When someone challenges their beliefs, they examine them instead of defending them blindly. This is why the humble eventually surpass the arrogant, because they keep evolving, while the ego-driven stay stuck trying to protect their image. But to build a mind that's immune to ego, you need to train yourself to detach from your self-image. The self-image is just a story your brain tells itself about who you are. I'm talented, I'm disciplined, I'm special. But the moment that story becomes your identity, you start fearing anything that threatens it. That's when ego traps you. You stop taking risks because failure would break the image you've built. You stop experimenting because you might look stupid. You stop listening because you assume you already know. Humility, on the other hand, allows you to be fluid. You can adapt, evolve, and reinvent yourself without resistance. You're not attached to being right. You're attached to learning. That's power. Let me be brutally honest. Most people reading this struggle with hidden ego. Even when they act humble, they're just being humble for approval. They say, I'm not that great, but deep down, they want you to disagree. That's fake humility, which is just ego wearing a mask. Real humility doesn't need validation. It's silent. You don't need to announce your humility. It speaks through your actions, through how you treat people who can't benefit you, through how you react when you're disrespected, through whether you keep learning after success or get lazy because you think you've arrived. Your humility is measured in how you behave when no one's watching, not in how humble you appear online. So, how do you actually cultivate it? First, practice gratitude every single day. Not the Instagram version, the real kind. Sit for 5 minutes and think deeply about what could have gone wrong but didn't. The moments you were lucky, the people who helped you. The second you realize how much of your life is built on chance, help, and grace, you'll stop feeling superior. Gratitude is humility in motion. Second, seek out people who challenge your thinking. Surround yourself with those who are better than you in some area and don't feel threatened by them. A small mind wants to be the smartest in the room. A strong mind wants to be in rooms it has to grow. Third, do hard things that break your pride. Take feedback. Do menial tasks. Lose arguments. Admit mistakes fast. Nothing kills ego than reality. The stronger your ego, the more your mind avoids discomfort. So force yourself into it. The next time someone criticizes you, don't defend. Listen. The next time someone outshines you, don't envy. Learn. The next time you succeed, don't boast. Reflect. Ask yourself, what did luck play in this? Who helped me get here? How can I get better from this point? These questions keep your feet on the ground while your eyes remain on the stars. Humility doesn't stop you from being ambitious. It protects your ambition from self-destruction. The humble person can achieve everything because they're never limited by their own arrogance. They can rise without losing their soul. And here's something most people never realize. Humility is magnetic. You attract people, mentors, and opportunities faster when you operate without ego. Why? Because humility is safe energy. People can trust it. They feel seen, respected, and heard. The arrogant repel opportunity because no one wants to help someone who thinks they know it all. You'll notice that life tends to reward those who are teachable. You might not be the smartest or most talented, but if you stay humble and hungry, you'll eventually surpass those who aren't. That's the paradox. The humble always rise higher because they never stop climbing. But don't confuse humility with timidity. Humility doesn't mean you think less of your worth. It means you know your worth so deeply that you don't need to prove it. You can walk into a room silently confident. You can accept praise without letting it inflate you. And you can accept criticism without letting it crush you. You can lead powerfully while still being kind. You can win without becoming arrogant, and you can lose without losing your composure. That's true strength, calm, grounded, and centered. Humility is not about bowing your head. It's about keeping your head clear when others lose their own. So here's the hard truth. If you ever want to reach your full potential, you must kill your ego daily. Ego will whisper, "You're better than them." Don't listen. Ego will say, "You deserve this." Ignore it. Ego will say, "You're right, they're wrong." Pause. Ask yourself, what if I'm missing something? That one question can save you years of regret. Every morning, remind yourself, you are not the center of the universe. You are one part of a massive, complex system that existed before you and will exist after.
Part 9. The Hidden Danger of Comparison. Ego's Favorite Trap. Comparison is ego's secret weapon. It hides in your social feeds, in casual conversations, in your own mind. It's subtle, but deadly. One look at someone's success, lifestyle, or appearance, and your ego instantly starts whispering, "Why am I not like them? I should be better. I deserve more." That whisper grows louder with every scroll, every like, every post, until it becomes a roar, driving envy, insecurity, and desperation. Most people don't realize that comparison isn't about others. It's about your ego. It's the part of you that measures your worth against someone else instead of your own potential. And here's the brutal truth. Comparison always leaves you losing. There will always be someone smarter, richer, fitter, more disciplined. If you base your value on others, you will always be behind. The Stoics understood this long before Instagram or social media existed. They knew that peace comes from controlling your perception, not controlling the world around you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't hanker after what you don't have. Instead, fix your attention on what you do have, and on the freedom you can gain from that." Comparison is the ego's trap because it shifts your focus outward. Instead of asking, "How can I grow?" Your mind asks, why am I not like them? Growth comes from internal attention. Success comes from internal standards, not external measures. The moment you start measuring yourself by others, you hand control of your happiness to things outside your control. That's why most people live lives full of anxiety, envy, and self-loathing. They've let their ego dictate what they should want. But here's the key. The moment you stop comparing, you reclaim control. The moment you stop seeking validation, you start improving. Stop watching others to measure yourself. Start watching yourself to measure your progress. The only competition that matters is the man you were yesterday, the ego you conquered today, and the potential you unlock tomorrow. Ego thrives on pride, but it also feeds on fear. Fear of being left behind, fear of insignificance, fear of failure. Comparison keeps those fears alive. When you see someone else's success, the ego whispers, if they can do it, why can't you? You're failing. That whisper is poisonous because it distracts you from action. Action doesn't come from envy. Action comes from focus. To break free, you must train your mind to see others' achievements as inspiration, not threats. Admire without envy. Learn without resentment. Let other people's victories remind you of the possibilities, not your shortcomings. The Stoics also taught the principle of amor fati, love your fate. Part of that love is accepting your unique path and timeline. Life isn't a race where everyone starts equally and finishes at the same time. Your circumstances, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities are different. Comparison ignores that reality and pushes you into dissatisfaction. The more you resist your path in favor of someone else's, the more you feed your ego's illusions. True freedom comes from embracing your journey, however messy, slow, or unconventional it may seem. Ego uses comparison to manipulate your emotions. It thrives on jealousy, insecurity, and resentment. When you compare, you enter a cycle. Seeing someone succeed, feeling inadequate, trying to prove yourself, chasing validation, repeating endlessly. This cycle never ends because there will always be someone ahead of you. The Stoic approach is to control your attention. Focus on what you can influence, your effort, your mindset, your values. Stop letting the world define your value. The more disciplined your attention, the weaker ego's grip. The more consistent your effort, the less comparison matters. Comparison also poisons relationships. When you measure yourself against others, it's hard to celebrate their victories. You envy friends, colleagues, even family. Ego blinds you to gratitude, empathy, and connection. Humility, on the other hand, strengthens relationships. A humble mind celebrates others without resentment. It learns from their successes instead of fearing them. It builds alliances, not rivalries. And over time, those relationships become lifelines of growth and opportunity, while ego-driven rivalry isolates you. Here's a practical exercise. Next time you feel envy, pause. Ask yourself, am I competing with them or with myself? If it's the former, you're feeding your ego. If it's the latter, you're evolving. Shift focus inward. Write down one way you can grow today without looking outside for approval. The more you do this, the more you train your mind to measure progress by internal standards. Over time, comparison loses its power. Ego shrinks.
your peace expands. The cruel irony is that most people who chase success are actually chasing validation. They want recognition, praise, and acknowledgement. But recognition is fleeting, unpredictable, and outside your control. Ego wants the applause. Humility wants the work. Focus on what you can control: your effort, your mindset, your values. Ignore what you cannot control: opinions, outcomes, or others' achievements. That's the path to real freedom. Ultimately, comparison is a choice. You can let ego manipulate your thoughts, keeping you anxious, insecure, and distracted. Or you can take responsibility, direct your focus inward, and use your energy to grow. One path leads to constant frustration, the other leads to unstoppable progress. Remember, the battle isn't against other people. It's against your ego. It's you versus you. Stop measuring yourself against them. Start measuring yourself against the person you were yesterday. And the moment you do, you break the chains comparison has on your mind. You reclaim focus, clarity, and purpose. You stop living in envy and start living in mastery. This is the Stoic way: controlling perception, managing attention, and silencing ego. Comparison dies, humility thrives, and your mind becomes unstoppable. Growth comes naturally when your attention is on yourself, not on others. The more you internalize this principle, the freer you become, the more unstoppable you become, and the closer you get to mastering the one person that truly matters: yourself.
Part 10. The final battle. Ego, discipline, and the unstoppable self. This is it, the culmination of everything you've learned so far. All the truths, all the lessons, all the warnings about ego, comparison, humility, and growth, they converge here. Ego is not just a part of your mind. It is the battlefield where every Stoic warrior fights daily. The fight is not against the world, other people, or circumstances. The fight is against the part of you that refuses to evolve, that wants comfort over challenge, that wants recognition over mastery, that wants validation over truth. And now, having dissected ego, having explored humility, comparison, and self-mastery, it's time to forge a strategy that makes you unstoppable. The first and most critical principle is awareness. Ego thrives in darkness. It whispers, "You're fine as you are. You don't need to change. You're already the best version of yourself." Awareness exposes these lies. Every time you feel defensive, insecure, or jealous, pause and observe. Ask yourself, is this me speaking? Or is this my ego? That simple act of recognition disarms the ego. Once you can identify it, you can choose not to feed it. Once you choose not to feed it, you reclaim power. Next comes discipline. Awareness alone is not enough. You must train your mind daily. Discipline is the hammer that crushes ego. Every decision, every habit, every micro-action becomes a battleground where you prove to yourself who is in control. Do not indulge fleeting desires for comfort, praise, or instant gratification. The Stoics called this ascesis, rigorous mental and physical training designed to free you from dependency on anything external. Wake up early, meditate, read, exercise,
Work with focus. Do these things not to look good, but to be good. The ego will scream, "Why bother?" It will seek excuses, distractions, and shortcuts. That is exactly when you must push harder. Each act of discipline is a strike against the ego, a reinforcement of the unstoppable self within you. Humility integrates with discipline to create invincible strength. The humble warrior does not need to dominate every conversation, impress every observer, or prove superiority. Instead, he focuses entirely on growth, progress, and mastery of self. This allows him to act decisively, without fear of failure or judgment. He can innovate, take risks, and challenge himself. Because his worth is not tied to outcomes, it is tied to effort and alignment with virtue. Ego, in contrast, is reactive. It fears risk, failure, and criticism. The humble mind is proactive. It embraces challenge, learns from feedback, and adapts continuously. The unstoppable self combines these forces, disciplined action and grounded humility. Another essential component is detachment from results. Most people enslave themselves to outcomes, believing that success, recognition, or wealth will validate them. Ego feeds on this need, creating constant anxiety, frustration, and dissatisfaction. The Stoics teach that you must focus on effort, not outcome. Work diligently, act virtuously, and let results unfold naturally. The moment you relinquish attachment, you neutralize ego's influence. You stop chasing approval, you stop fearing criticism, and you start acting from a place of strength. This detachment is not passivity, it is focused action with serenity. It is the difference between the impulsive man who acts to prove himself and the unstoppable man who acts to perfect himself. Reflection and journaling amplify all this. Each day, review your actions, your thoughts, and your emotional responses. Identify moments when ego took over. Note where humility and discipline prevailed. Analyze failures, not to punish yourself, but to learn. This ongoing self-inventory ensures that ego cannot sneak in unnoticed. Like a general reviewing the battlefield each night, you anticipate the ego's strategies and fortify your mind against them. Over time, this practice rewires your mind. Ego shrinks, humility grows, discipline hardens, and self-mastery becomes second nature. Finally, embrace impermanence. Recognize that every success, failure, praise, insult, gain, and loss is temporary. Ego clings to permanence, creating fear, pride, and detachment. The Stoic mind understands the transient nature of life. Wealth, status, health, and even knowledge are fleeting. What remains is your character, your choices, and your inner strength. When you anchor yourself in this reality, the ego loses its power. You become immune to external fluctuations because your value is internal, immutable, and self-sustained. To summarize the ultimate strategy: first, awareness. Recognize ego and its manipulations. Second, discipline. Train daily, act with focus, and push beyond comfort. Third, humility. Stay grounded, embrace correction, and let learning guide you. Fourth, detachment. Act virtuously without obsession over results. 5th, reflection. Review, analyze, and adjust constantly. 6th, impermanence. Anchor your value internally, not externally. Combined, these principles forge the unstoppable self. The ego may whisper, scream, or rage, but it is no longer in control. You become the master of your mind, the architect of your destiny, and the stoic warrior capable of facing life's chaos with serenity, clarity, and unshakable strength. This is the essence of human mastery. The fight is long, continuous, and relentless. But each day you conquer your ego, you grow stronger, wiser, and freer. The war is inside, but victory is real, because the man who defeats himself conquers everything. This is the Stoic path. This is how you become unstoppable.